Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Strategoi video. Ryan here with yet another tournament report, this time covering the Alliance Open Team Championships here in the Netherlands. And I guess I want to preface this by saying that this is going to be a little bit different format for our tournament reports, in the sense that though it was a 2-day tournament, 5 games in total, it was also a teams tournament, so that might need a little extra explanation for people who aren't used to the concept. And furthermore, it's also, it was a dramatic weekend for multiple reasons, but one of our dear friends had a medical concern happen in the middle of round 2. I don't want to talk about it too much online because it's private, but that player and another player that took care of the player had to vacate their places on their own teams, and we had to fill in a couple spots. One with our friend Nick, who was at a wedding of a friend of mine, ours, the day before, and then Mike Vandenholm, who was helping out anyway, so he stepped in and played his Fire Slayers list. Funny enough, if you've paid attention to the last report that Nick and I did, I confused Flesh Eaters with Fire Slayers a couple times, and here we go again. Nick played his Flesh Eaters, so there we go. Flesh Eaters and Fire Slayers jumping in to save the day. So what I'm going to do, since Nick wasn't there for day 1, I'm going to cover day 1 and my experience separately from Nick, and then what we'll do is bring him in for the last 2 games and talking about that. It might mess up the order of the slides a little bit, so we might have to do a little clever editing here and there, but in the meantime, bear with us. It's going to be an interesting report, and in short, I'm really happy to report about this because it was one of my favorite, if not my favorite, tournament I've been to thus far, despite the kind of low points of the tournament itself with my friend's health. They're doing better now, and all things considered, and we're all pulling for our friend. So anyway, it was tough in the hard moments, but the peaks of the tournament were also quite amazing. So the net effect, at least for those of us that got to experience the whole thing, was definitely a really positive one. So let's move on here. We've got our typical summary here with a tournament review, army lists, matchups, and conclusion. And again, we might jump around a little bit more this time since I'm recording solo for the day 1 stuff. All right, so tournament review. This is a teams tournament, and if you're not familiar with teams, which is more of a kind of European thing, although America, Canada, Australia do compete in teams when we have AOS Worlds happening this coming year in the Netherlands, but last year in Prague. It's this format where you have a certain number of players that represent a team. Now, they don't play on the same table at the same time. It still is a solo tournament in that sense. But in this case, we had 18 teams of 4 players each for 72 players. And it's a 5-game tournament, a normal GT type atmosphere. 3 games the first day, 2 games the second. Each one was 3 hours, 20 minutes each. Forget the mini there. The 20 extra minutes were there really just for pairings. And what pairings is the way it works is, this one is a little different. I'm not going to explain the whole thing because, to be honest, I'm not sure I 100% got it anyway. But to be fair, I never got the other matching systems all that well. I'm not the guy who does the magic, let's just put it that way. We let our team captains do that, but I'm happy to weigh in on my 2 cents on who I should be paired up against. But the way it works is your team gets paired with another team, and essentially you have a little mini Texas Hold'em style game where you have cards that have your army names on them, and you put them face down in a sequence. One of them's an attacker, one of them's a defender, but this is different than the attacker and defender that we know in the game. And in short, you end up kind of playing this little mini game where you kind of psych your enemy out. They get some choices. You have a certain amount of control over who you play next. a certain amount of control is given up, and there's this trade-off, this little dance that we end up doing. So generally speaking, if you're the defender that's put down, you get more control over who you're paired up against, and this might be chosen strategically based off of the battle plan that you're supposed to play. In this given team's tournament, the very first defender knew which battle plan they were going to have to play, and then all further matchups, there was someone who more or less got to choose which of the 2 remaining battle plans for that round they wanted to play. And you didn't have to have all 3 for your team going on. It could play out that only 2 battle plans were up for grabs, depending on how each team chose, how each player in those scenarios. It sounds a little confusing. It's a little easier if you see it in practice. Like I said, we tried a different system this time around that was a little new for all of us, so even that I'm still getting my head wrapped around. But in general, the format of teams makes it so that your matchups can be better suited to your list's weird capabilities. So you don't necessarily have to write lists that are capable of taking on all comers, so to speak, but rather your list can be designed to be really good at dealing with a certain type of opponent. That said, of course, sometimes you lose control over the matchup, and that can end up swinging the wrong way in against your favor. And then the scoring for the teams works with kind of like a net score with everyone added up together, and then you can get it kind of caps off at a max differential that you can get for maximum points. It's an interesting system. It really makes for a dynamic tournament, and it can even make it so that losing your games isn't actually bad if your other teammates make up for it with greater wins. So if a member or 2 of your team got 20-0 wins after the points difference, then if you tied or win a couple points under, you probably still ended up pulling out the win against the team, and that's all that really matters at the end of the day. Very interesting how the dynamic works, and it's really good for bonding with your friends and getting to know each other and having to interact instead of just being a kind of lone wolf playing by yourself. It's also worth pointing out that all 4 teams had to be of different armies. Could not use duplicate war scrolls in the case that you could use coalition or allies. You couldn't use the same grand strategy more than, or maybe at all, sometimes it's more than twice. Couldn't use the same artifacts, same endless spells. I think the only things you could really duplicate were battalions. So that made for some interesting matchups. And like, for example, my list, my Tzeentch Guild of Summoners list, likes to use an Arcane Tome, but we decided to give it to our Gargants player, who actually performed the best out of our group. So I guess that was the right call. And I ended up getting a great artifact. I found another replacement that was pretty good anyway. So, all right, let's move on to the missions. Basically, even though there was one required battle plan for each round, basically all of them were in effect. There might have been something that wasn't. I haven't actually taken a look, but it was really hard to prepare for it at any given moment because, well, all of them were kind of on the table. So I can tell you which ones I was playing. Honestly, I might be a little bit lost on those too, but I think I can remember more or less which ones were which. There's a lot to remember from a 2-day tournament like that, and it was a pretty crazy weekend. And then scoring, like I said, is based off of a differential system, but a team's version of that. All right. So the meta, as you can expect, this is a huge tournament with 72 players, and we had in the same hall also roughly the same amount of players for 40K, though of course there was no crossover there. But it was very much a European training ground for Worlds coming up in late May, early June. So it was largely very competitive, though there were some more casual teams there. And the countries that were represented, of course, we had the Netherlands, Belgium, France, although I don't think any of our Belgian players were Flemish, so it's more accurate to say that we had 2 French-speaking groups of people there, but I could be wrong about that. We also had Malta, and I believe we actually had a fifth player. We had two guys named Ryan from Malta, which someone explained that to me. It was pretty funny, but I actually played next to a table of a guy named Ryan. I could have been matched up against him, which would have been really funny. We also had Serbia, Denmark, and I believe two teams from Denmark and Switzerland represented. Of particular note, the award for best sportsmanship went to Serbia, and on a personal note, I have to say the Serbians were amazing. I spent a lot of time hanging out with them and had an amazing game, even though I lost against their captain, Marko. I couldn't say more nice things about this team. I feel like I've already made some good friends, and that's pretty awesome. From what I heard, also the Maltese team was quite lovely too, and these were kind of new additions to the or newer. I think Malta might have played in Worlds this past year, but Serbia is definitely new on the scene. And I think this is the first time we've had so many Danish people come play at an Alliance Open tournament here in the Netherlands. So all around, very nice to have such a wide representation of different European cultures. As far as armies are concerned, from what I gathered from the stats that we have, thank you to Jeffrey for those, one of the TOs and also one of the guys spearheading the Dutch Worlds team. We had 8 Night Haunt players, so that's not one for every single team, but that's still very clearly a very popular army for lots of reasons. It's a very techie army. 6 Sylvaneth players, also kind of same idea, lots of mobility, very techie. And then we had lots of 5 instances, 5 cities, which I'm surprised by as a lover of cities and with a large cities collection myself. I did not think I would see that, but definitely Tempest Eye builds right now are doing some cool stuff. Lumineth sure makes sense with Sentinels and magic dominance. Stormcast, always popular. Nurgle, super popular, fills a really strong role. And Sons of Behemoth have made a return to tournament experiences. I feel like I haven't seen a lot of Sons for a while, but for whatever reason now, very strong. I had to play Sons twice, which is twice as much as I've ever played Sons. Before this tournament, despite playing 140 games before this, I'd only played Sons once. So I tripled my experience over the weekend. And then we had 4 Daughters and 4 Seraphon players. Missing, apparently, were Gloomspite Gitz, entirely gone. Ogre Maw Tribes, extremely weird considering how popular Ogres seems to be in both Belgium and the Netherlands, but maybe, as we know, not particularly competitive unless they're driven by a very good player like Dennis Baumeister, who seems to be fantastic with them. Iron Jaws, also really strange that they were missing as one of the better alpha armies in the game. And Big Wa. Do we even consider Big Wa really a separate army? Kind of. I personally don't like splitting the Auric Warclans book into 3 separate armies, but I understand why we do it. But if I were to separate it into multiple armies, I would not include Big Wa in that sense. I feel like Big Wa is more like a, I think of Legion of the First Prince as more of its own entity than Big Wa, especially considering they gather like their 3 primary battle traits from literally the soup of 3 other sub-armies. But it is what it is. We didn't have Big Wa. And then, furthermore, we had 11 Kronspine Incarnates and 11 Purple Suns, of which we even had a competition to see whose Purple Sun ate the most enemy models. And that award went to my buddy Lex, whose Rick and Morty inspired Purple Sun, I already mentioned in the last battle report, ended up eating some ungodly number of models. So, good job. Now that the Purple Sun's been nerfed, I assume we're going to see much less of that going on. But I myself even lost 1 model to a Purple Sun despite having Tzeentch. So it happens. All right. The experience. I will speak a little bit for Nick on this and let him weigh in on it later if need be. I'm sure he'll cover it in his coverage of the games. The overall experience. It was mostly friendly despite being quite competitive in terms of army lists. I think the advent of Worlds and team tournaments, from what I understand, the people that I know that went to Worlds this past year in Prague even though it's an exhausting tournament, you can play singles 5 games before you end up playing 6 games in teams. So some people even played 11 games. And despite that, a lot of people came away from it only more energized than before and having made lots of good friends. So I'm not surprised to hear that there's a camaraderie that ends up happening at this tournament. I actually made a number of new friends despite knowing a lot of people here. So I get that. It was generally a friendly environment. And like I said, it was one of my favorite tournaments, if not my favorite tournament I've been to out of 17 in like the past year or so. Furthermore, there were many meta lists, which is to be expected. No one's really testing anything. I mean, maybe a little bit, but for the most part, these were lists that were designed for crushing enemies, being really good for teams, and the only experimentation that really was going on, except for maybe a casual team here or there, was for people that were testing the limits of certain weird skew builds. Like, for example, my teammate Dawa's 220 zombies, to see how that actually ends up playing in a competitive sense. Turns out maybe that one didn't work out as well as we'd hoped, but I'm sure it was still a cool experience to kind of see what leaning in so hard into a unit that we oftentimes think of as broken, in a sense, with a 6-inch auto pile-in and mortal wounds and coming back as much as they do. I'm sure Dawa, if he were on this review, would probably say something to the effect of zombies. There's probably a cap on how many zombies really are effective, and it's more about having the buff pieces, using them in a controlled kind of manner rather than having a giant army. But I don't know that for a fact. He might have just also had some pretty bad matchups, especially considering they're Galician veterans, meaning that people are doing double damage against them, versus what it would have been, say, 4 months ago when that wasn't the case with bounty hunters, as prevalent as they are. And furthermore, this is a great test for Age of Sigmar Worlds coming up. So I think that's pretty clear from what I've already explained. So personal experience, I went 2-3, which I want to just go ahead and put out there is the best performance I have thus far done at a 2-day tournament. I've done 5 2-day tournaments now, 4 of which were 5-game tournaments, and 1 of which was a 4-game tournament due to COVID quarantine, well, not quarantine, but curfew restrictions here in the Netherlands where we couldn't play an evening game. So we had to play 2 days of 2 games. But that tournament, actually, I went 0-4, despite having numerous close games and never really getting totally obliterated. If you had to say binary-wise, win or loss, I went 0-4, even though my team actually played decently well, 4 out of 12, I believe, at that tournament. That was basically this tournament last year, which was a smaller version of the same thing. And then the other 3 one-dayers I've done, 2-dayers, one of which was a teams tournament in Osnabrück, Germany, and the other 2 were single-player GTs. I only went 1-4. Again, I tend to take swingier, less competitive, non-meta appropriate lists, sometimes for fun. I always try to bring something competitive-ish, but sometimes I just get bored playing like meta answer list type things, and maybe it's also a matter of experience. I just have to keep growing as a player. Either way, this was the best I'd ever done. I went 2-3, and that's progress to me. And actually, I had a blast playing my own army, with one major exception, which I'm going to get into. And the salt has been totally removed from the system, so I can just be more objective about it at this point. But let's put it this way: I was very salty during my middle game of the 5. Anyway, there were tough matchups. 2 of them, so games 2 and 4 were against Gargants, which was a learning experience for me, and I'm glad to finally play some more games against them. And generally speaking, both games were lovely, especially against my new Serbian good friend Marco, their team captain. And then the middle game, and to no one's surprise, that was a tough matchup, was against Caradron. I'll talk more about that later, but it was literally my least favorite AOS game out of 143 that I've played to date. And unfortunately also was on the live stream for the Honest Wargamer, which was extremely embarrassing. But it it is what it is. And at the end of the day, I summoned 10 Lords of Change and got close to summoning 11th. And had I not had that KO matchup, I probably would have gotten at least 2 more. So I feel like though there was no award for summoning Lords of Change, just for models eaten with purple suns, I feel like I accomplished some personal award for myself in doing that. So it was pretty great. That means 2 out of 3 of my games I actually summoned 3, which was fun. And thank you to Yopa, my buddy, for lending me his 3rd Lord of Change. So there we go. Nick only played in 2 games, and he went 2-0, and not only did he go 2-0, spoiler alert, but he went 20-0 in both of those games, which is amazing. He did. As a fill-in player, I think Nick very much earned his stripes, and that's coming off of a wedding the night before. I know he didn't get a whole lot of sleep, probably, so Nick just ripped through some stuff. Anyway, I left what he said right here. I actually should have changed. I meant to. This was his points from the last tournament, so I'm just going to throw a couple things in there. That, of course, this was him doing a fill-in thing. I don't know if he would say it probably was a good indicator of the meta, but that's not what he supplied for this slide. I still have yet to make a perfect slide, so my excuses here. And I don't know if it helped refine his list for future events, but it is what it is. So let's move on. All right, here's my army list. It is even more complicated than before. I'm still in Guild of Summoners. Still have Show of Dominance as getting a Gleetian Veterans unit in the center of the board. I will say, even though I loved the tournament, one constructive criticism would be that in many of the battle plans, they told us exactly where to put the terrain pieces, and a lot of them put a very large terrain piece in the very middle of the board, which effectively destroys the chance for an army that needs to get Show of Dominance in the middle of the board. This is where you have a Galician veteran unit in every quadrant. For 2 of my games, it totally destroyed my chance of getting a grand strategy, and I know that there's some amount of, you should have planned for that, but as we know in this battle, or in this current battle pack, GHB, it's really hard to take Galician veterans and have them survive for the whole game, to have 1 in each quadrant. And I could have strung out my pinks maybe when they turned into blues or brims, but certainly not to go all the way around a big piece like that. It was basically denying me a grand strategy just on the way the board was built. And you could say, well, Ryan, why did you play on that board? Well, you don't have control a lot of times over which board you're playing on. And a lot of times when you're doing pairings, that's looking at the terrain setup. There was already so much else to think about. That didn't factor in very often. Plus, I think a lot of the boards just had pieces right in the middle. So if I were to offer a little constructive criticism, I would maybe not put any battle plans that had a terrain piece that was exactly in the middle point, because otherwise it just kills a whole grand strategy. But whatever, it's not a big deal. It wasn't a make or break deal for any of my games. I would have gotten more points or lost less points, whichever way you want to look at it, depending on the scenario. But otherwise. So as you're probably aware from the last time I talked about my list, I had to move some things around here to accommodate the fact that the FOMO box, Arcane Cataclysm, that had just come out for Lumineth and Tzeentch, I had to move some things around to accommodate for the fact that Chiric Acolytes are no longer wizards, so they weren't helping me get my casts up. So I lost 2 casts in that. And furthermore, the Curseling was no longer a 2-caster. He's like a 1.5 caster, and that's assuming you roll a 4-up and that your enemy has a wizard within 18 inches of you at the start of your hero phase or whatever. So he really got nerfed and only came down 5 points, and it really didn't make sense. So I decided to flip a number of things around. One thing you'll notice is that all of my casters have 2 spells. That's because I took the extra enhancement with 2 command entourages here. I had 6 casters in total to help get the casts up since none of my other units were doing it. And I did take an extra artifact, the Wellspring of Arcane Might, on the Change caster to get him up to, to get him rerolls all the time no matter what happened, even if I didn't get the Blue Scribe's rerolls off and I didn't get Cogs off, because the Change caster needed it more than anyone else did because he can do unlimited casts. And now that he's learned 2 spells, in addition to the 3 universal spells we all have, Arcane Bolt, Mystic Shield, and the Realm spell, plus one of the 3 endless spells that I've got in this list, plus his War Scroll spell and these 2 spells, he could get 7 off to max the amount I could get out. And I really needed that consistency there. So I guess while I'm talking about the Change caster, I might just reiterate this is still with the 2nd edition book, but with the FOMO box updates. And the Change caster up to this point can still cast unlimited spells that he knows, so long as you roll 9+, whether it's modified or it can be modified to do that. So it's very easy in my sub-faction to get a +3 to cast. With rerolls, 6s with rerolls are almost guaranteed to happen. So I pretty much got 5, 6, 7 spells out with him every time if I needed them. But anyway, I also didn't put my command trait, because I was running out of space here, command trait and artifact that went on the Magister, my general, but one of them gave a 12-inch bubble, wholly within bubble of Battleshock Community for all Disciples of Tzeentch units, or Guild of Summoners units rather, and the other one gave on a 4-up a free CP in my hero phase. The spells, I'm not going to go into the spells that I took here because they were more for redundancy. I'll just talk about the main spell that I used with each caster. The Magister on disc, plus the Blue Scribes and the Zongor Shaman, who's also on a disc, are really fast. They all move 16 inches and fly. Plus the Sorcerer Lord on Manticore moves 12 inches and flies. So I had much more mobility in my list this time around. The Magister has the sort of mini Kairos spell, Bolt of Change, that turns one, if it kills any units, models in a unit, it turns them into a Tzeentch Chaos Spawn, which was really good for tying up archer units, which is one of my big, Achilles heels in this army, and put a Chaos Spawn there, which meant that any other shooting units would have to shoot, anyone that was in combat with them would have to shoot there instead and blow their turn. So that was there for that ability, since I didn't have Kairos in the list. I couldn't really squeeze him into this kind of list and still do what I wanted to do. Plus I was already bringing in 2 Lords of Change, maybe 3 anyway. The Sorcerer Lord of Manticore did this anti-horde spell that comes out to, on average, 50% of a horde unit's number of models. The Blue Scribes has a way to kind of crap out a spell on a 2+, that can't be unbound, and usually I just use this to get out their rerolls for all Tzeentch wizards wholly within 18 inches of the Blue Scribes, which is amazing. But they could also learn other spells, so if in the worst case scenario, if one of my guys dies but they've learned that spell, then they can be the one to cast it. Pretty cool. The Change caster, like I said, is my main source of mortal wounds output, with 2d6 mortal wounds spells, plus another one that rolls 9 dice and every 6 does d3 mortal wounds, so it can swing quite a bit. Plus, of course, getting all the other spells out. The Change caster is just amazing. Zongor Shaman has this amazing spell now that Zongor Enlightened on disc, being the only Zongor unit. Well, that's not true. There are 2 Zongor units in the FOMO box, but the only one that didn't previously have the Zongor keyword. It used to be that the Boon of Mutation spell that the Zongor Shaman cast, for every model dead from a D3 mortal wounds impact, you got to add, not replenish and resurrect, but add a Zongor model to an existing Zongor unit wholly within 12 inches from the Shaman. Well, when it was just Zongors on foot, okay, you're adding a couple Zongors to a unit. It's kind of slow and dies easily. But when you add them to an Enlightened on Disc unit, which is in Bounty Hunters, at 215 points, that's quite a lot of points for each one you bring in. I've summoned up to 2, but I think if I'd played against some of the right units, like let's say I played against zombies and could kill 2 per turn, you can have as big of a unit as you want. Now, this might not last into the new Battle Tome, but it did for sure in this tournament. So it was quite a cool combo. Just, they always hung out together, and the Enlightened on Disc want to hang out with the Shaman because the Shaman's also giving them +1 to hit on their, the Zongor, the Rider, not the Disc's melee profiles. So you were doing some crazy damage with that unit. I've deleted some big blocks of things with even just 3 or 4 of these guys, but getting them up to 5 or 6 is even better, of course. And lastly, the Great Brave Shaman has a War Scroll spell that allows, he targets a unit, and that unit must move 2d6 inches closer to your army, the closest unit, this is a suggestion of my team captain Dawa, because a lot of times with 11 drops, I was essentially at risk of the other player making me go first and then having nothing within my 18-inch threat range for spells. So this let me, through the portal, I had the spell portal with me, force at least 1 unit to come closer, and there was a good enough chance, if I deployed smartly enough, to allow my other casters to have something to actually hit instead of just casting into the air to get fate points up, which is still cool, but not as cool. So anyway, I also had a unit of 10 horrors, with splitting, of course, 2 times 10 Kyrics, which actually I think are way better than people give them credit for. Not for their save, but for their 10 shots at 4s and 3s -1, 1. And in combat, 4 attacks at 4s and 3s -1, 2, plus 7 attacks that don't have the rend and only do 1 damage. But actually, as Expert Conquerors with the pinks, that adds quite a bit of bodies for me taking objectives. I've already talked about the Zongor Enlightened on Discs, but in short, they've got 3 attacks apiece +1 for the champion for each rider with their better weapon, 2 attacks apiece for their beaks, and D3 attacks for the discs themselves. They actually can do a quite high number of attacks for even a small unit, and now have a 4+ save, and when they're in combat with someone, turn off combat command abilities, which is pretty crazy. It's basically like an auto roar, and they're not even monsters. Plus, if they go second, if you take the second turn of a battle round, for that whole battle round, they're getting +1 to wound on all 3 of their profiles. They are very good right now, and they're fast. Definitely worth it, unquestionably. I would have taken more if my list was built differently, for sure. And as compared with my old list, I swapped out a lot of Slaves to Darkness units, 2 Chaos Chariots, a unit of 5 Chaos Knights, and a unit of 10 Chaos Warriors, in exchange for 16 Iron Golems brought in as allies, because now they were in Bounty Hunters just to allow me to even have Bounty Hunters for the Zongor Enlightened, because you have to have 2 units in that battalion, but also because they have a 4-up, effective 3-up save at any given moment, count as 20 wounds, and the Sorcerer Lord on Manticore can give them as a mortal Slaves to Darkness unit +1 to save in addition. So they were often sitting on a 3-up save, ignoring Rend 1, or sometimes Rend 2, which was pretty amazing. So they were a good screen for my otherwise more sensitive Galician veteran units. And summoning wise, I summoned 2 to 3 Lords of Change every time, so that's 800 to 1200 points worth of stuff, except for the KO game. And furthermore, I was summoning up to 3 Zongor Enlightened on Disc, but I could have done even more. That would be around 215 points for those 3, and up to 2 Tzeentch Chaos Spawns, each at 85 points, so 170. That did happen in one game, I believe, putting a couple spawns on the board. I think one game I summoned 1,440 points worth of stuff, which was true to the name of Guild of Summoners, pretty awesome. And pulling out the Lords of Change was so fun. I even have one painted, it's a Kairos model, but he's split down the half as red and white on one side and blue and white on the other. And every time he came out, I would sing the Team America theme song, which was pretty awesome. Some people hated it, some people loved it, but it was what it was, and I'm super happy with my super silly bird. Endless spells wise, I had Cogs for the rerolls and redundancy, Spell Portal for obviously getting one of my spells through, if not many, if I brought a unit closer by with the Great Bray Shaman's Devolve spell, and a Soul Screen Bridge, which I also used as a sort of screening mechanism, but also for teleports to get the pinks around and help me grab objectives and stuff. Ultimately, I feel like this is the most strategic list I've ever played, and though it takes a really long time to get through the magic phase, I got remarkably fast at this. I'm actually really happy with how it played out, and I never got clocked the whole time. I told almost everyone I played against that essentially my real enemy was not them, but it was the clock. And I was pleasantly surprised at how much faster I've learned how to play this list. I'm really hoping a version of it remains for the new Battle Tome that's coming up soon. And but somehow there's a little less details to focus on, and then I can play a little faster. And then just really quickly, I had 1,995 points, effectively 191 plus wounds of after summons. Total bodies on objectives 183 plus, and total models 107. I had 2 units that's wrong. I have 1 unit that's reinforced. I still missed that. And then 11 drops. That's correct. I'm going to actually pause here. We're going to bring Nick in a little bit. I'm not going to talk about my games just yet. We'll kind of go through that with Nick. And the next slide will be bringing Nick in with his list. All right. So now we've got Nick on the line with us. Nick, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for asking. Happy to be here.
Nick, I've already told everyone about you having to step in and the circumstances around that. Do you want to add anything about your kind of last minute being asked to join and the turnaround from the wedding? I've already told him about that. And is there anything else you want to add about the circumstances of the tournament? I know you wanted to participate in this tournament, but of course you chose to go to our good buddy Martin's wedding instead. So is there anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, it was really under sad pretenses that I joined the tournament, but I'm glad that everything worked out. But that being said, and that aside, I think it was kind of a best of both worlds. I got to go to my buddy's wedding, and then also I got to do like a little one-dayer at a really awesome event. So I was really, really pleased with that and had a lot of fun.
Yeah, we'll talk in concluding thoughts. We can kind of get your general sense of the tournament at large, since I've already kind of covered it earlier, but maybe get your take on all that stuff. But why don't we start by talking about your army list, as we usually do. We got Feeding Time 3 here. So go ahead and give us the rundown of what's changed since the last time we talked about your list, and what the reasons here were for this tournament in particular.
And I'll start off by saying I promise I do own other models. I just have a lot of fun playing Flesh Eater Courts, and I like to tweak as I go ahead. So how this list is different from the last time you saw it was I swapped out a couple of things. And what it is the main one is I got rid of the extra mount trait, and I swapped that for another artifact. Swapped my general to being my archregent, and then swapped some of the spells around between the heroes. And so if we look at the Archregent first, what I did making him the generals, I gave him Dark Wizardry, which gives him +1 to Unbind, Cast, and Dispelling, thank you. And then also gave him the artifact, the Dermal Robe, which does the same thing. So in reality, he's sitting on a +2 to cast, which is pretty helpful. When we look at his spell, the Spectral Host, you want to roll a 10 because that does a benefit on it, where instead of affecting 1 model, it affects 3. So there's a lot of benefits to getting +2. In addition, this really drives home the success rate of adding extra attacks. So I've gone through before with the War Scroll spell, he allows D3 extra attacks. So this is really to ensure that goes off every single time, because that plays a huge role in making your dragon successful. The other one, big change is on the zombie dragon. Like I said, I got rid of the extra mount trait, but I added in the Arcane Tome. The reason for this was I wanted to be able to cast both his War Scroll spell and Flaming Weapon. The War Scroll spell, to remind everyone, is an aura of 16 inches. My units wholly within 16 inches get to reroll their wounds, which is extremely helpful for this army. And then also applying Flaming Weapon to his mount attack, so the sword-like claws, which is 7 attacks basic, hitting on 3s and 3s, Ren -1. And with Flaming Weapon, that's 3 damage, so it's really, really helpful with bringing down those hordes. Remember, with the rerolling is really nice. So yeah, that's pretty much the change. Oh yeah, the other one is I ended up putting Blood Feast on the Terrorgeist with Gruesome Bite. The reason is that one gets stuck in a lot more than the other Terrorgeist, and he's usually a little bit more damaged. So I wanted to give him an opportunity to heal, because what Blood Feast does is it does on the lesser version D3 mortal wounds, or in the higher version it's D6 mortal wounds, and the amount of wounds taken on an enemy unit, he can then heal himself. So it's another avenue for healing. So yeah, that's the change, and I'm happy with this. I thought it was it performed well. It was fun it was fun.
So the sub faction, I don't know what COD stands for. And Feast Day is the name of the sub faction, or what?
Yeah, name of the sub faction is Feast Day. COD, I'm not sure what that is either.
Okay.
Well, Court of Delusion. Haha. See, I play Feast. I know what I'm doing.
Cool. I mean, maybe you're just a fish guy and you really like COD.
I do love, or Call of Duty, one or the other.
Oh, right.
A fish COD player.
Okay, so I've already told everyone what your record was in kind of the summary, so everyone knows that you absolutely demolished. Do you think we'll talk about your matchups in a second, but as far as while we're looking at the list here, how much of that do you attribute to the changes that you made here? Do you feel like the changes you made, because I know this isn't the list you necessarily were about to play. If you were about to play in another tournament, you had a Kronspine kind of list that you were toying with, and you talked about in the last video in the future possible lists and stuff. Where does this fit in kind of your list evolution?
So this was really testing out the Arch Regent as the general sitting on +2 and the artifact on the Zombie Dragon. Those two were the clutch players for both of my games. Like I said, it worked out really well that I consistently got the extra attacks and also consistently getting Flaming Weapon helps. And then on the War Scroll spell on the Zombie Dragon goes off on a 6, so decent odds of getting it. So coupling those two together, I was able to do kind of situational choosing of, do I need to do a large amount of mortal wounds to just chew through a save, or are these huge blocks that I need to get through? And depending on that question, or the answer to that question, I would either buff up my Terrorgeist for the mortal wounds, or I would buff up the Zombie Dragon to really just crank out a ridiculous amount of damage. So those two combined were huge, and then also adding in the rerolling wounds made my every combat phase very, very effective. What I consistently also notice is that third dragon, the other Terrorgeist that has Monstrous Vigor, still didn't really do a whole lot, which is why I'm leaning towards swapping him out for something different. Everyone is playing their role really, really well in this list except for that second Terrorgeist. So I'm trying to find something that will also really serve a pretty good purpose, other than just being a backup for the first Terrorgeist in a weaker version.
Yeah, and obviously we've got the summons that you can bring in, which, just in case someone's watching this and haven't watched your other list reviews and stuff, tell them a little bit more about the summons real quick, just to digest.
Sure. Yeah, so every hero that you see on this list can summon something. It's going to be either some ghouls, some crypt flayers, a courtier, so a Vargul for the Crypt of Infernal, and so they can summon, you can check the War Scrolls of who does what, but really the summoning is any table edge 6 inches and 9 inches away from any enemy. So really you have pretty good board control if you need it. So it helps a lot also to score some early battle tactics when you think of desecrate their lands or barge through enemy lines. And with so many summons in this list, you're summoning potentially up to almost 1,000 points on top. So you're really playing a 3,000 point army as opposed to everyone else's 2,000. So it really gives a lot of control as well, so you can dictate the terms of the battle. But the only thing in this list in particular that I have to keep in mind is my grand strategy is Growing Kingdom, which means I need to keep 3 of those summoned units alive at the end of the battle round, so I can't be too hasty with what I do with them.
Yeah, not getting too greedy, right?
Yeah.
This is the first time we both happened to play at a tournament where we both were summoning a shit ton of stuff, so I guess we have that in common. I wonder if we collectively for relative to how many games we played, because you only played 2 out of 5, we're summoning the most out of anyone else at the tournament. I have no sense for that, but I wouldn't be surprised if that were the answer in terms of points. Also, Jonas is going to be kicking himself once I point this out, but technically it could have fallen on either of us as well over the number of battle reports we've done here with your list. But Terrorgeist is spelled wrong. I thought maybe there is no R in between the O and G, but I looked it up just now, and it is in fact Terrorgeist, not Terrorgeist. So for anyone out there that's been frustrated with that every time we put these on screen, we have now finally caught it, and we'll never do it again. I say, as I probably will forget.
Turog? Oh, I thought this was a Turog heist the whole time.
Turog heist, yes. It's a mythical creature. Last question, your 5-drop list. Mine was huge, 11-drop list, so I never really got to choose. But where do you find 5-drop sat at the tournament with the 2 games you play? Because I'm seeing in the meta right now, a lot of people are still doing very low drops. So did you get out-dropped with the 2 games you played, or were they playing more kind of casual, less cutthroat lists?
I was out-dropped in both games, but interestingly enough, both opponents wanted to go first. So that was nice.
Okay, yeah, so there you go. All right, let's move on to the next slide here. Let me make sure that's, sorry for the mouse there. All right, here we go. So matchups. I put Suns over here on the left side because, well, I played, as I mentioned before in the video, 3 times more Suns than I'd ever played before. I tripled the amount of Suns I've played. And since I played 5 games and Nick played 2, what I'm going to do is cover my first 3 games, and Nick can just ask me questions about them since he wasn't there. And then we'll do Nick, me, and then round out. So, and I left Stormcast over there underneath my name. That's supposed to be Tzeentch. Yet again, more mistakes I keep making in these slides. It's because I keep reusing them from previous videos and then forget that there are things I need to be changing. But my excuses. So,
Jonas, let's have a chat about this Ryan guy later.
Hey now. All right, so
tell it, Daughters.
So I started with Daughters against a very lovely team. Again, I've talked about the team's format. I got placed down as the one who got to choose who I get to play against out of 2 choices, and I chose Daughters because even though he was using models for bow snakes, they were all actually spear snakes, and I was pretty confident that with no Marathi spear snakes, he had like a the Bloodrack Shrine, and he had a Slaughter Queen on the Cauldron of Blood. I was pretty confident that I was going to be able to plow through this list mortal wounds wise, and it was a very favorable matchup for me. It was a lovely game. I ended up summoning 3 birds by the end. I didn't actually put the 3rd one on the table because it was pretty much over, but I had tabled the guy. That said, I didn't go 20-0. My army doesn't tend to perform that way. It tends to be a slow burn, and it's the kind of thing where I'm slowly getting all those battle tactics, but so is he. And so even if you table someone, it doesn't necessarily mean that you got a full victory. You got any questions about that matchup, Nick? Or
so what do you think was the plan on his part? So this is kind of a unique list. What do you think it was the thing that led him to build it in such a way with just 30 Blood Sisters and really no big hammers?
I think his team has been playing a lot of 9th Age, if I'm not mistaken, recently. Which, for those that don't know, is kind of the spiritual successor to fantasy battles, because, I guess you could say Age of Sigmar is, but it's the literal successor, but it's just not promoted by GW. It's kind of community organized, and the rules are maintained through the community. But they played a big Worlds tournament for 9th Age not too long ago, and I know at least a couple of the guys on the team hadn't really played AOS in a while. They're even throwing out, they're asking questions about turn order and stuff like that. So I think it's more of just them getting their feet wet again back in the Age of Sigmar in the current GHB rules and everything. And I think they were just there to have a good time. So we had a very favorable matchup in that sense right off the bat. But yeah, I think that was mainly what was going on. I don't know. Maybe he was thinking more of like strategy from the previous GHB. I don't know. I couldn't really answer that question. He was a lovely guy though, and we were playing Prize of Gallet, where you have the activated objectives, and it just worked out in my favor, I guess, too. But not having any ranged attacks really made a difference, and I think I got both of my Tzeentch Chaos Spawns out by just killing a model in a couple units, and I don't even know if I lost either one of them. They're just walking around being weirdos. So yeah, it was a weird game.
And do you think that game would have been much different or a different outcome if they had in fact been the bow snakes as opposed to just the spear snakes?
100%. That said, one of the lists I almost got matched up against had 15 bow snakes. This is actually one of the Serbian players, and they've got 24-inch range.
Yeah.
I think that could have been bad, but like, I think there's a version of reality where I could have put a portal up, gotten a portal off on them, and then put a chaos spawn in their midst and just kept that double. Maybe the double hero phase shooting would have killed the chaos spawn, and then they would have gotten a turn, but it would have cut their shooting in half. It still would have sucked, but I think it might have been reasonable once I started killing enough of them. I don't know. Clearly, it would have been a worse matchup for sure, but I never had to go up against it.
Was it reasonable?
Yeah. What's that?
Just a Fargo reference.
Oh.
Anyways.
Okay. Cool. So I'm going to move on to the next one. The next one was second round where I got paired against the Serbian. We got paired against the Serbian team, and it was Sons of Behemoth with Krognos and a mini Gargant. Just one, not a unit of 3. Interesting game. He was the most lovely. He definitely would have won my best game of the day, but in teams you vote for the whole team, and we also voted for their team, but yeah. So Marco was fantastic to play against, super chill, very friendly in terms of how the game felt when you were playing it, and just very like, he wasn't worrying about the clock. So I actually had asked for this matchup, forgetting that Krognos has the spell ignore, that you roll 3d6 and it must beat the casting value of a spell. I do have high casting values, but still the average on 3d6, for those that don't know, is 10.5. So it's just on average going to cancel everything out. So unless you get lucky, you basically should just ignore Krognos. And I feel like I got pretty lucky on this. With just targeting everyone else. I functionally killed all of his remaining units, just not Krognos. But he wiped out so much of my stuff early on, was definitely holding a bunch of objectives. I think it was on the battle plan that has 8 objectives on it, but I forget the name of that. It wasn't Silksteel Nets, I don't think. Oh, it was the one, yeah, it was the one where you can raid, or maybe that was a different, anyway, that might have been it. But if so, then I played that same objective, that same battle plan twice. But in any case, it was a bit of a slog. But seeing how much damage I can put out was pretty fun. I think after the differential, it was a 15-5, so I still held on to 5 points. A tie would be 10-10. And it was, it was still really fun. Krognos is definitely a bad matchup for me. And Marco had said, although I don't know if he was just being nice here, but he said he got lucky with getting double turns and stuff like that. That, maybe it could have made a difference, but I had such a nice game with him anyway, it didn't really matter. And I have such little experience with Sons, or at least up to this point I did, that I just saw it as kind of a learning experience, a really friendly learning experience.
And did he position them in such a way that he's charging the Giants with the 3d6 as well?
He tried. I think he did get some of those charges off, but I think he actually played a little conservatively on that too. Like, I wouldn't say that was the most impactful thing. And Krognos also, I managed to block him off from taking out a monster with his monster charge, where he rolls and multiplies the 2 numbers. So that never was really the scary part. It was just more that he was just eating away all my screens very quickly. And then, I ended up, running away to go grab some objectives on the other side of the board. And, I have so many units. I have 11 drops in my list plus summons that, was functionally just running away from him the whole time and still had stuff to go capture objectives or whatever. So yeah,
right.
It was chill. I don't know how I feel about Suns. I'm really hoping that in the new Battle Tome, I know Suns players are going to hate this, but I really hope they all get bracketing profiles for how much they count as on objectives, like Krognos's ability. You know, when he takes wounds, he counts as less on the table on objectives. I really think that would make it a little bit more fun, and maybe even if they lowered their points values a little bit, and to allow you to take maybe a couple minis alongside the big guys. I don't know. That could be kind of fun, I think, just to have more targets. And keep in mind, 2 of my favorite spells in my list do things when I kill a unit with D3 mortal wounds. But this is the absolute worst matchup for me because nothing in his army has low wounds counts. So the chance that I'm getting a Chaos Spawn out or an extra Zongor Enlightened on disc is very minimal. and I had to play against this army twice. So it is what it is. But it was a lovely game.
Nice.
So my last matchup was against KO, and as I've already alluded to in the previous part of the video, this was an absolute horrible matchup for me. It is functionally my least favorite game I've ever played. And I was definitely salty during the game. David was playing for, I think, a team of mixed people from different places. One of the players was a Dutch guy that lives in the UK now, and the rest were Paul from our community was there, French Paul, and then Sev, I believe, who was on the Belgian team, the Worlds team. So it was going to be a hard matchup no matter who I played. For example, Sev was playing with Nico's Flies Nurgle list. So, and Nico's rated, I think we just heard on Rob's channel, Honest Wargamer Rob, that Nico is in the top 3 of all European players in terms of rankings. So he couldn't make it this time. But I mean, I'm just trying to say that the lists were really, this is going to be a hard matchup no matter who I win against. But my team sometimes, doesn't have control over who gets put with who. And this was, as they like to say, throwing me under the bus. This KO list had a purple sun in it as well that ate my Chaos Sorcerer Lord of Manticore, which to this day is the only meaningful unit that I've had that's gotten eaten by a sun, and it's happened twice now. I don't know what it is. He just likes jumping into the sun. And then an Ironclad, 2 frigates, the normal set of like either Chemist with Spell in the Bottle, 2 Admirals, I believe, and a Navigator, and 2 times Artco plus a big unit of Thunderers. And it was in Zilfin with the hero phase move. He took the first turn, which almost never happens, but he used it super effectively. I've only played KO, certainly not with Tzeentch, twice prior to this somehow, and they're just not that popular in our meta. And I didn't know how to properly screen for this. And he just, in one turn, I think Rob, because it was live streamed, unfortunately this game was live streamed, and Rob, I'll tell you guys more about this in the table talk we do next, I think, but this tournament had Honest Wargamer Rob there covering everything on the T Sports Network, which was great. Super nice guy. Owen Jackson was there too. And they had talked Rob had talked a big thing in another Honest Wargamer video about a big talk about the Tzeentch list I had, and he had even chosen our team as his like wild card favorite, or not wild card, but as his favorite team as far as lists are concerned. And I could tell he was excited about my list, and it was just an extra big bummer that it was being broadcast. The only time my list was going to get broadcast was when I got totally shut down. I've already said in this tournament review, that I got 3 birds out twice, which takes 57 successful spells, our fate points. In this particular game, I got 3 fate points, which isn't even enough to summon a first bird at 9, which just goes to show about turn 1.5 in, I just said, dude, you get full points. I don't even want to, like, this is an uphill battle. All of my heroes are dead, basically. It was the least interactive game I've ever played. And KO, I have a KO army, but I haven't actively played them yet. This really turned me off from even wanting to play KO because they all have different shooting profiles. I think the models are amazing, and I like the movement shenanigans and all that, but like, I really hope the next book streamlines it so that at least their shooting phase goes faster, which is ironic to say that here I am playing these really long Magic phases, but at the same time, it was just such a gross matchup for me that I had a real hard time coming back from this game. And this was after the round where our friend had gotten had the medical emergency that we had. So I wasn't exactly in the best mood for this kind of game anyway. So it is what it is. I learned a lot of lessons from it, I think, and I tried to apologize for the saltiness afterwards, but it was just a bad perfect storm of all kinds of stuff that really was a bum out for me. So it is what it is. But yeah, I'm never going to watch that stream. I wonder if they didn't catch our audio from, they told us they'd only catch maybe 3 minutes of audio from a whole game, but there might be a point where I was just bitching, and I don't want to hear it. So anyway, that was that. Any questions about that game?
No, I think I'm going to let that one go for now. I think you've suffered enough.
Yeah, thank you. It was painful, but it wasn't the Purple Sun, and it wasn't the Purple Sun that made the feel bad. It was definitely the rest. But it is what it is, and it's over, and we can move on to day 2, I think. So let's start with you. You played when you came in the bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, having not had to play a game the day before, but definitely from having been at a wedding in a castle of all places.
Yes.
And by the way, congratulations to Steph and Martin. That's pretty awesome. But you played a Stormcast list here. Now tell me a little bit about your team that you ended up jumping in on as the reserve player. You filled in for my buddy Paul Fondevide and his Castelli list. Do you feel like your list kind of maybe was a good fill-in for such a like Alpha E? He's got like some big monsters, the Blood Knights and all that stuff. Do you feel like you guys had maybe a similar role that you would have played on the team?
I don't know. I don't know his playstyle, but for me at least, I was happy to just say that we kept it death for that matter. But overall, it seemed to work out when we looked at the pairings and we were putting the cards down for deciding who our opponents were. We seemed to find a pretty decent spot for everyone in the 2 games that I played, so it seemed all right.
And tell us a little bit about who else was on your team.
Yeah, so we had Nikki, who was playing a Stormcast list, nice chunky Fulminators and Liberators and whatnot. Interestingly enough, in the last tournament, I played against Nikki with this list, so that was pretty fun. So I knew that one well. We had Terry, who was playing his famous Hedonists and Slanesh, as per usual, which was always fun to see. And then we had Tom playing Fire Slayers. So a nice mixed bag there, I'd say.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've looked at the rankings, but you actually did the second best of the team despite playing one day.
No, I didn't see that. All right.
In terms of points, yeah. Nikki got more points than you. I think he went 3-2. I'll have to double check that real quick, but yeah, you definitely came in and added a whole lot of value out of nowhere to the team. So congrats on that. Tell us a little bit about this Stormcast matchup that you played.
So that was it was against Stormcast, as you said. It's got a nice big Star Drake in there. It had 4 Fulminators, 4 Tempestors, and 2 Concussors. So a bit of a smaller body count on that one. Oh, and 2 Storm Drake Guard. Yeah. He took the first turn because he outdropped me, and it was a pretty interesting matchup. I think we were playing in the presence of idols, if I'm not mistaken. And so with that deployment zone, his first battle tactic was actually barge through enemy lines, which I thought was pretty interesting because, he gets to deploy. I don't know a whole much of his list, like the sub-factions, but he was able to basically deep strike those guys in outside of 9. But then he had an interesting choice to make, because if he charged me, he was going to be well within range of my Terror Geists and my Dragons, because it's just the way that I always deploy, as you call me, a corner more. So if you alpha me, you're going to get bit. That's just kind of the setup that I have. So he had to choose between doing what his soul wanted to do, which was charge me in the face with his Fulminators and his Dragons, or stay back and get the battle tactic, which he chose to stay back and get the battle tactic. which then ended in the way that you would assume, as I counterpunched with my dragons as hard as possible, and ended up deleting the Storm Drakes and the Tempesters in round 1. Won the double turn, then came back and got rid of the Fulminators, and then by that point it was pretty much over. We shook hands, I think, tabling at turn 3, I think. So then for a full 20-0 points, yeah, it was pretty brutal. I felt bad on that one just because of the amount of output. I think during the game, Tom, the TO, was walking around. He always loves watching me do my Terrorgeist rolls because they were at full strength, which means I added 4 extra attacks to the Fang Maw, re-rolling failed hits and re-rolling the wounds to the War Scroll spell. On the first roll, I rolled 4 6s, so that was 24 mortal wounds just to start, and that was pretty much it. Yeah. And that wasn't counting the successful hits on top of that. So it was really a brutal showing.
Yeah. I was going to say something about I'm totally blanking here, but I'm also thinking about the Star Drake too. What did the Star Drake end up doing? He's known for being tanky, but like, did it live up to that reputation?
No, because it's mortal wounds. So I just chewed through it, on a double turn because I cleared out the 2 units in front of me. Then I went and got him. I also positioned in a way that he couldn't really redeploy or run away from me because of my summons. So I summoned and pushed them forward. So again, he really had nowhere to run. I actually got lucky because he was going to use his Star Drake for battle tactic. This one's mine to bring down one of my dragons. And I got a very fun redeploy of 6 inches off, 6 or 5, and parked that dragon right behind another dragon. So it was going to cost him if he did it. And he ended up failing the charge, I think, as well. So, and then again, the counterpunch got rid of that thing really easily. Yeah.
Did he get to use his splashback mortal wounds on save rolls whenever you attacked him, or did the mortal wounds do enough that he never got enough save rolls to make those trigger?
I don't think that... So he did some, but it was mostly about upon death. So every time I killed something, the Stormcast explode. That's where I was getting a lot of the mortal wounds from, but not a whole lot from anything else, if I remember correctly. Most of the damage done to my dragon was because of the explosions and any splashback. There was not a whole lot. He almost dropped one with the Tempesters in the first round. It was about halfway, but then again, healing and then healing and healing again brought him back to a very safe spot. I think the lowest that my dragon was at 12 wounds, and I got him back up to about 6 or 7 before the game was over. So it was, yeah. They did what they do, so that was a nice showing for the Dragos.
Right.
What are they? The Turo heists.
Yeah, Turog heists.
The Turog heists. Yeah.
Oh no. All right, Jonas is gonna be kicking himself. But technically, we didn't catch it either, so it's our fault too. So something that's worth pointing out here, perhaps, is that because you finish your game so fast with this army and I used the full time, you actually sat... I didn't get to see any of your games taking place. I did try to scan the room to see who you were against, but you actually ended up coming and sitting back and watching my games play out. So you can definitely weigh in on a couple of these games if you want. My next one was against another Belgian team from Wallonia, the French-speaking part, and this was a Sons of Behemoth player named Christian, and he had a Kraken Eater, which was my first time perhaps ever playing against that. This is the one that kicks the objective around, which is kind of, I mean, it's awesome, but it's also insane. We were playing one of the battle plans with 6 objectives. This was the alpha objectives one, where I have to choose one of mine every turn. He has to choose one of his every turn to be the one you get extra VP. I don't think that actually plays a part unless someone's totally kicking your ass, because you just pick the one that they have no chance of getting, right? And then I don't know. But he also had a Kronspine in the list, which reminds me, I forgot to talk about my team. I might as well. I mentioned that Dawa had 220 zombies in a Soulblight list. But Olaf, who was also playing Gargants, had, I want to say, 3 Gatebreakers, if that's the really strong one, and also Kronspine. And then Pater was playing Lumineth with a number of wardens and kind of like a pretty nasty Lumineth list. But anyway, back to this. This Sons of Bahamut list reminded me of Olaf. So basically, same kind of story here. It was an uphill battle for me. I didn't end up killing as many giants as I'd like. I put a lot of wounds on different giants, but he kept pulling. He had the grand strategy where he had to run with a giant every turn, so he just kept alternating which giant was kind of trying to engage me. And he also had the Kronspine up in my face. I made a super stupid move because I forgot that the Kronspine, if he eats a monster, ends up going back up a level, and I would have killed him. I had him down to level 1 and should have just never charged him, but oh well, I learned my lesson. And I don't think it would have won me the game, but it may have given me a couple more points to have something moving around on the board and have him have one less unit. We ended up kind of playing it out because the game was kind of taking a while to get there. We started pretty late for one reason or the other. But, the game turned out to be nice enough in the end, and the guy was super nice, gave me a die at the end too, as a nice gesture, and, he was being sweet, so I appreciated that. But I just think this was also one of these uphill battles for me. I also went 15-5 on this, and at least scored a few points for the team. What did you think watching this game? Anything you feel like sharing?
I mean, I always enjoy watching you do your hero phase because you're always so out of breath and like running around and just trying to get things done because you've got 10 trillion things you need to do in the hero phase. So I enjoyed watching that. And then I think one of the things that it was this game or the one after, I don't know, I pointed out that I always enjoy like watching, I liked watching you use your endless spells as more screens than anything like that. So like the bridge is like a huge movable screen for you, which was really interesting to watch as well. And then also just the heartbreaks of you got one wound to go and the guy couldn't do it, and it was just I felt like I was just part of the game. Like just it hurt me to watch that.
So for those that know, Tzeentch, along with Ogres, Gits, and Lumineth right now, is one of the battle tomes that doesn't have either a battle tome or a White Dwarf update, and that means that we don't have extra battle tactics. And as such, of course this is about to change with the new battle tome, but as such, this means that with the exceptionally difficult or increase in difficulty that we have with the new GHB's battle tactics, a lot of times I get screwed out of options. And so one of the only things that was possible left for me to do was to have my Magister on disc do this one's mine and bring down a Gargant that only had one wound left on him. And statistically, this could have gone either way. I even used a Fate dice to get his shooting attack through, because it has to be a shooting attack, can't be mortal wounds. So I couldn't Arcane Bolt him, and I couldn't use his damage spells. So it left me in a weird place where it came down to this guy's saving throws, and it was like a 50-50, and I just didn't get it. Would have been nice, but oh well. And would have, of course, resulted in me having more models left over, because then he got to retaliate with some attacks against my guys and took out a bunch. But I did end up killing one of his Gargants, and then did a Hail Mary thing at the end that didn't end up playing out with birds. I was 1 point away from getting a third bird out in this game, but honestly it wouldn't have made a difference. I was already fighting an uphill battle here. So and also, I think, thank you for the compliment about the endless spells. I think that would definitely, you mentioned that for the first time at least, out loud in the following game. But we'll talk about that in a minute. All right, so your last round was Cities of Sigmar. Tell us about that.
So the army name was Living Shitty, which I always appreciated. So the start to this game, we both agreed, last game of the day, let's try to have some fun. Let's not take it too seriously. This one I honestly, again, did feel bad about, because if the dragons did what they do in the last one, they really did what they do in this one. Again, so the list, as you can see, was primarily the big shtick was the Iron Drakes that they had, and then Andrasta coupled with them. So took first turn. The cities took the first turn. They deep striked within range of my dragon. This one was a little bit of error, I think, which we talked about in the post game of how we could have done better. Was that the iron drakes were dropped not in line of sight of the dragon that he wanted to kill. So it limited the amount of shots. If he had full 30 shots going in that thing, the dragon would have been dead. But because it survived, and this was actually the zombie dragon, and this kind of goes back to the way that I talked about how my options were. I buffed up the zombie dragon instead, and so it was fully strengthened. I think I got every buff known to man. I finest houred it, I mystic shielded, gave it a 5-up ward, gave it 4 extra attacks, flaming weapon, and re-rolling wounds. So it was ready to go.
Yeah.
I moved it into position to charge the Iron Drakes, and but obviously I can't charge it right away because an Unleash Hell is just going to delete it. So I had to kind of gamble, and I dropped some of my summons within 9 inches. A couple of them, just because if they failed, then I have other options. And so what it ultimately what came down to was I rolled for my Crypt Flayers. First roll was like a 5 or something, so not enough. Spent the command point and then made the charge. Obviously, they died from the Unleash Hell, and then charged my Zombie Dragon in and killed all 30 of them, and Andrasta in the same 2 attacks, thanks to Feeding Frenzy. And from there, it was pretty much it. The Storm Drakes kind of just held down their little corner for a minute, and then I just cleaned house with the rest of them. Again, the game was over probably around start of turn 3 for another full 20-0 points.
So did he do the teleport with the bridge? Is that what you were saying? Like the Sorceress did the teleport?
No, so they were in the sky. So for every one deployed, they put one in the sky. So then they just did their deep strike outside of 9.
I've never thought about that because it's an auto like it's just kind of the auto take that with the 30 Iron Drakes you bring the bridge.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would also work. One of the benefits of taking the bridge though is you can use the bridge and then put them behind it. You know what I mean? And so that way they've got a screen instead of just dropping in wherever and then, maybe getting blown out. But yeah, it depends.
Yeah. That was kind of the advice that I gave him a little bit, I think, as well, because like that was really, I think, unfortunate that with the line of sight thing, and also there was really no need to really get in that close to me, especially with a pretty chunky range. I think a screen would have been really helpful. And then I would have to endure a couple rounds of that shooting, right? So it was really fortunate on my side that I got rid of my biggest threat in the first turn. So I really had the upper hand for the rest of the game. So that was one of the things that we reflected on, is keeping those alive and in a threat range, but not in danger would be one of the strengths, I think. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer, but...
Yeah, and for what it's worth, Levy is playing, one of our colleagues in the community here, is playing very successfully a Tempest Eye, I believe, Cities list with 30 Iron Drakes, Krondys, and Bridge, and he performed very well at this tournament. So it certainly is, it's like there's still a strong, he went 4-1. It's certainly a strong build to have Iron Drakes, but I think it might also be dependent on exactly how you play it, and of course some matchup dependent stuff and experience with these kinds of things. But from what I can tell, the guy you played was a super nice guy too, so that also makes for just a fun game. What did you feel? Yeah. Did you feel like it was kind of a feel bad type game, or did it feel like there was at least some amount of interactivity?
I felt bad. So regardless if he felt bad, I felt bad for it, because again, it's just unfun watching your things just get removed from the table when you've got no options, nothing. Especially so the way that Feeding Frenzy works is like I attack and I kill half his guys, and they're like, okay, great, I can. They're like, no, I go again. And then they're all dead. And you just gotta you didn't pay to watch me roll dice.
Right.
So I felt really bad about that. So I apologized more than once throughout the game. But yeah, like I loved playing against this guy. He was a lot of fun. He was good. He was an amazing sport about it. The whole time he's like, I know what army I'm buying next. Oddly enough, I was playing against another Flesh Eater corpse right next to me, and so like at the end of it, we were just screaming Flesh Eaters and just being dumb about it. But yeah, it was a really fun game. Like I enjoyed my opponent. The actual game itself was probably really unfun for him. But overall, I don't think anybody left upset or anything like that.
Right. Well, good.
I try not to put salt in the wound when it's just going that way. And I was trying to give tips on like how you could kill things, and like, because at that point, like, yeah, I don't need to make it worse, you know, like, oh no, I'm gonna redeploy it all at defense when you're, yeah, it's just, no, why? Come on.
Yeah, that's how I play too. I don't actually like doing 20-0 type things. Fortunately, I almost never get a 20-0, so but like if I'm playing Slaanesh or I don't know, something like Ogres, like that game that we already talked about with Rolf at the end of the last tournament you and I talked about, like I don't feel good about it. So whenever this happens, I'm just always like, I'm like, this isn't fun for you. I recognize, I'm sorry, and blah blah blah. And sometimes people just want to go and show off their models. Sometimes it's their first or whatever tournament, or they intentionally just brought a list that like is swingy and they have fun with. As long as someone, I think it's more about the interaction that you have with the person that's standing across from you for a couple hours than it is about the actual outcome of the game. And that can make such a big difference with even these big crushing losses. It can really swing it back to, I'm glad I met you, And like I said to one of my opponents at this tournament, I said, my goal at the end of this game, I know we're at a tournament, I know it's competitive, but my goal at the end of this game is that the next time I see you at a tournament, the next time you see me, we're excited to see each other. And like that really is, I think, at the heart of why I play Warhammer. I want to have a good time, I want to play an honest game, but at the same time, I'd rather just enjoy those 3 hours. I only have so many hours left on this planet. I don't want to spend it like bitterly resenting something,
It's a way to make it dark.
But what I mean is, like these tournaments, this is a very competitive tournament with a few exceptions. This is not these little training things where we can test the meta or whatever. This is the meta. People are there to win, and you and I have gone to tournaments where we felt like that balance was not very fun, and I think what it takes is people getting a little bit realizing that it's not always about winning, it's about the other stuff, and that winning is kind of like the secondary at the end of the day. So I'm sure that your opponents, even though you went 20-0 twice, really appreciated how nice you are, and I've heard other people tell me how nice of a player you are to play against. So that's always a good thing. So
you and your compliments.
Come on, it's not just it's true. I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. So all right. Anyway, so Sylvaneth, you got to witness the back 2/3 of this game. This was against a new buddy, a French guy that's been living in Arnhem here in the Netherlands for 8+ years, I think, named Thomas. And he is a lovely person. Unfortunately, the salt ended up swinging a little bit the other way, and he got a little frustrated with my list, which is fair, but it was actually the closest game I had the whole tournament. We were at a 2-point difference on this, and I actually love hanging out with this guy. We were drinking on night 1 before you got there, and I was like, I am so excited to know this guy. I think he's going to be like a great friend moving forward. We played Silk Steel Nets, which definitely wasn't in his favor. We played a super slow kind of conservative game where we weren't trying to, neither one of us was advancing. All the teleporting he was doing with his unit of swords, Kurnoth swords, was through a tree just to come on one of my flanks and kill some Zongors. It took 2 turns of doing that, and then I just ended up blocking off the trees. He did some good damage with the Warsong Bomb a couple times, but it really didn't functionally do a whole lot. There was one thing, I know that a move that he ended up forgetting to charge with some Kurnoths against a unit of Kyriks that had come into his territory that he forgot about, and that he ended up really regretting, and that always sucks when you forget something that you meant to do. It was just too late after it had already happened. But he had the Warsong Revenant, he had an Ancient. I just Mortal Wound a bunch of stuff. I ended up getting 3 birds out. This is where I was using a lot of endless spells to kind of navigate the battlefield. I was doing that. You're right, in the Suns game too, getting the pinks around. But this is the one where you mentioned it. And he had a few endless spells, but he, apart from Spite Swarm Hive, he didn't really use them. And then once I started getting my birds out, they were all within range to eat them for free next turn anyway. So I actually thought this was a very tactically interesting game, and I like close games like this. I get that it's slow and very conservative play style, but if another army comes into me really aggressively, like Neil's 3 Maw Crushes, or your guys when you come in real heavy, or Paul Fondervaida's heavy Castellite list, it's not a slow game at all. Or the Gargants. Most of the games I played in this tournament were not slow at all. This one was just where we're both kind of playing it safe, and so I think that can make it feel a little bit more tedious. But anyway, I had a lovely time getting to know Thomas and playing this game with him. I think he's a lovely person, and look, I promised him I'm never going to play this list against him ever again. So hopefully we can have a game that feels a little bit more interactive for him. But it was very hard fought to get those 2 points, and I had a good time. Do you have anything else that comes to mind about this game?
I mean, I finished my game in about an hour, so I had quite a lot of time to skulk about and creep people out. So I would peer in on yours, and it seemed that the more the clock ticked away, the more frustration built towards the end. And then I could relate, because to him I'm like, yeah, bud, I've been there. I've played this list twice now, and so it was fun to watch. But again, yeah, the little cheeky screens with the endless spells I thought was fun. I really thought it was going to be interesting, because the magic on the Sylvaneth side with Gnarl Root could be quite good, and also challenging with your Unbind. So I was curious to see how that play out. Also with no ranged attacks. Usually you'll see some bows in there with the Kurnoth. So it was an interesting list. It was fun to watch. I enjoyed it. Well-painted models as well. It's always a plus.
That's for sure. And the Tree Lord Ancient does have a shot that could do some stuff, but it didn't end up pulling a lot of weight at the end of the day. That also made me think of something else, and now I am blanking on it. But if it comes to mind again, I will bring it up. Let's go to the next slide and wrap some things up. So, conclusion, tournament results, prizes, future goals, closing thoughts. I'll go ahead and just bring up a few things here. So there was a best dressed competition, and my team was the only team that even tried to do anything that resembled trying, other than just wearing their world's team jerseys. I was definitely the odd man out here, because they were trying to do something to the effect of this Dutch trailer trash show called New Kids, and there's a movie that I think they did that a spin-off of the show called Turbo, and so we were Team Turbo. We're basically trailer trash, hardcore hard style kind of dudes wearing tracksuits. A couple of them were wearing wigs. I didn't have a wig or a chain, but I did shave down to just a mustache, so I was looking very porn starry, and a number of the characters on the show have a mustache, so it was we clearly won this award. For me, some other non-official prizes were and I'll talk about it more some other time, but the shout out that Honest Wargamer Rob had about our team, and talking so positively not only about our team but specifically about my list. He's a Tzeentch player, and you never see Guild of Summoners at these tournaments. I've watched that video so many times because it just made me so happy even before going into this tournament. And I'm not the biggest fan of 2-day tournaments, but this is unquestionably my favorite one, and that was part of a big part of it. I like that we went in the spirit of having a good time, and that was first and foremost. And then another one was literally meeting Honest Wargamer Rob itself. You got to meet him too. He's super sweet. Even after my crippling loss against KO, he came up and did a decompression talk with me, and just kind of was like, man, that was the worst possible matchup. My buddy Steve Follows, who's on the England team, is one of the best players in the world. He sent me a text right as the live stream was going on. It's like, hey man, so cool to see you playing on the live stream. I'm watching, rooting for you. And I was like, What a crushing defeat! But to have so much support behind my silly little army was really fun, and it made this tournament such a great time. The first team tournament I did, I functionally played a list that wasn't mine, and that was just so much less fun for me. So bringing some weird skew list that no one ever sees at these things really made it such a nice time. So just everything except for the medical concerns that happened to our friend, really made this tournament special. And I'm very much looking forward to more Alliance Open events coming up and Teams events too. I think I'm really digging how Teams works, which might be a good segue to how you felt about it. I know this was your first time getting to play a part in a Teams tournament. I know you really liked the Texas Hold'em style kind of intrigue of the pairing system. Tell us a little bit more about like how you felt even with the 2 games that you got to play in a team setting.
Overall, like I was always really interested in like how the cards were played, and like you said, like Texas Hold'em style. So it was like a whole other level of strategy to the game, which always is appealing to me. So I've always been saying like I want to get in there and see how that works and witness it firsthand. So I was super happy that I got the opportunity to do it. I was glad to join. It was in a much bigger venue than we're used to at this location, which was stunning. And I walked in and I was like, oh my god, I'm at like a convention. I was blown away by it, so it was really, really great. I was happy to help fill the slots, so it was nice to be included. And I think there is a different vibe to it when you have these larger GTs. When you're doing like a singles tournament, you're with your friends, but you are primarily on your own, right? I liked the aspect of a team because I had like a group to run back with, and my team name was Bacon and Beans. So I was like, all right, Beans, how'd we do? And we're just like checking in, and then what makes sense? What's the best matchup? What do you want? It was really an interesting dynamic that it was refreshing. I really enjoyed it. So I had a blast doing it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I was happy to help the team to be a part of their 2 wins. So that was nice. And yeah, I can't wait for another teams tournament. I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Now the question is whether we'll end up being on the same team or not. And obviously that would be lovely. We've talked about doing with our more casual group that we sometimes play with, of guys who don't go to tournaments as much. But, obviously there's a possibility we'd end up on the same team in one of these hyper-competitive environments too. So I'm open to all of the above. And or if you want to go rogue, there's a possibility that you'll end up being on the Dutch team. Who knows? And I won't. So I'll be there as a fan supporting you guys and throwing some statistics in the background or something. So I think you proved your worth super well at this tournament. Here's another compliment. Sorry.
You're gonna have to stop it at some point.
Yeah. Well, the question is, once you switch off of flesh eaters, are you going to start sucking and then you got to build it back up again? Is that how you work?
I'm a one-trick pony, yeah.
No, I'm not that you're a one-trick pony, but more that you get better as you play one list for a long time. And when you start a list, are you worse?
To pull the veil here for the viewers here is Ryan is our local rules lawyer. I am not. So I've actually, I don't know if you've said this or not already, but I invested buying all the battle tomes for Ryan so he can then tell me the rules because I don't read. I don't know how. And so I imagine that, yes, I'll play a list and I'll need to tweak and refine and get to it because that's not my strong suit. I learn my best from actually losing matches and trying to reflect on what went wrong and what went well, which is ultimately how we're at feeding 3 now, which will soon be feeding 4 and 5. And then I think I will put them on the shelf after this season, and then I'll look to the next army.
Right. Yeah. I think it's great. It's just I just get bored really easy, and I've got so many models I want to try out before they fall out, especially the city stuff coming up. Who knows what's going to get squatted. I should also mention who won. The top 3 teams were, I'll go from bottom up. The Maltese team, the Island Boys, I believe, but they had a lady on the team too, so hence an asterisk after boys. But they took 3rd place, and I think everyone really enjoyed playing against them. And then team 2 was the Belgian team, list one of the Belgian teams, I should say. And then Team 1 was French Kiss, which I think was actually Tom's pick back in the Honest Wargamer, or someone's pick in the Honest Wargamer review show ahead of time, preview show, as the most likely to win. They've got some players from the French national team, and they're the only team that brought a coach along, to my knowledge. Also, it's worth pointing out that my new buddies in the Serbian team, the Dragon Order, I think they took 7th place, and they won the friendliest. I think I've already mentioned that, best sportsmanship. So that was pretty cool. My friends Peter and Tone won 2 of the painting contests, so that's cool too. Lastly, what place did your team get? I know mine got 13 out of 18. Do you know what yours did? I have it somewhere here.
I think we were 2 or 3 below you guys.
Let's see. You're called Bacon and Beans. Yeah, you were 15, so out of 18. Yeah. But you came in and started earning some points back. And to be fair, Paul would have been on the team, Paul van der Weide. So who knows what kind of difference that might have made too. But as it were, that's how everything turned out. Future goals, I'm just waiting for the new Tzeentch Battletome, really, so I don't know what the Guild of Summoners is going to look like moving forward. But actually, against our buddy Luke tomorrow, I will be playing an all-flying Tzeentch list that's not built around so much crazy hero phase shenanigans. It's just more about movement stuff. And then you've already talked about using a Kronspine in your list. Is there anything else you want to talk about for future goals?
I'll just say it this way. I'm looking for allies. Let's see what comes of that. Oh. Seeing if there's a better choice there, because I'll scream it everywhere. The Kronspine model and rules are dumb, so I don't like them. I play it out of necessity. So I'm trying to find something to fill that gap as soon as possible.
Sure. And closing thoughts, because we're hitting kind of a time limit here. Closing thoughts. Do you have anything you want to say about the tournament format, or anything else that you just comes to mind about how this all played out and then you got to be a part of it?
I will just say thanks to Bacon and Beans for letting me play with you guys. It was an honor. I'm really glad to know that our friend is doing better. And to the Alliance Open team for hosting such a great event. It was a lot of fun. Yeah,
really have to say to Martijn, Tom Meges, and Jeffrey Nijhoff, this was just such a lovely event. I couldn't have been happier with it, really, as far as it was run and handled in the best of times, worst of times. I just feel like this was the one to beat now. So. Very happy with how it all turned out. Definitely would recommend these events. Glad to see so many people coming in from other countries and to have met so many new friends at this event. So can't wait for the next one, actually. So in conclusion, as always, thank you guys for watching. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Join the Discord where Jonas and I, and maybe even Nick, if he feels like it, will jump in there and toss in our 2 cents on whatever you have to mention. Thanks for watching this longer tournament report, but hopefully, since it was for a longer event, it seems warranted. Keep commenting and getting the word about the channel out there. We love interacting with you guys and always look forward to hearing what you guys have to say. So in the meantime, this is Nick and Ryan out.